Now I'm recording. There we go. Excellent.
Right.
All right. So, hello everybody. This is a sort of special follow-up video to the Psych of RPGs video on Necronautilus. I'm joined by the designer of Necronautilus himself. Oh, dropped my phone.
I
Adam
thought that was
Vass here.
applause.
It is. It's my simulated.
I heard clapping. I heard what I wanted to hear.
Adam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to folks?
Sure. My name is Adam Vass. I use he, they pronouns, and I design and publish tabletop games as World Champ Game Co., or sort of as myself and as a brand simultaneously. You know how that is. And most recently, just fulfilled my responsibilities for the Kickstarter for Necronautilus.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think you just posted earlier today that it is done, or maybe it was yesterday. Done.
Really wanted to have the hard out at New Year's, have the reset button, and especially with another campaign going up in less than 2 weeks now, I needed to make sure that this was taken care of.
Yeah, very excited about Babes, not Blades. Hopefully
Babes
we
in
can
the
talk.
Dark. Yeah.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about that at the end. But I wanted to talk to you about Necronautilus because I just posted that video about memory and what we know about memory, because memory plays a big role in your game, or it's a substantial part of the system. And so I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your thoughts about memory, especially sort of beforehand and maybe afterhand sort of stuff, based off of maybe what you or the audience have learned from the video, if anybody learned anything. So I guess, when did memory become a thing that you wanted it to be a part of Necronautilus? Like, was it at the beginning? Did you know right away, or is that emergent in design?
It's an interesting question, because a lot of the initial design stuff for this game is a very hazy memory for me now, because it went to Kickstarter with a $2,500 goal, and I had basically some art ideas, and I had a core loop, but the core loop has ended up changing quite a bit over the course of design. So I knew I wanted the characters to be just sort of like one class, not necessarily specialized beyond the fact that they all can do anything they want, within the limitations of what you as a player can come up with. Mm-hmm. So this was my spin on OSR player skill versus character skill. In this game, your characters have every skill, which is distinct from being a level 0 character or something like that. But it presents the same problem as having no skills, in that when a problem arises, what do you as a player go to as your problem solution method? So it's kind of this ever-present Rorschach test as a player to then interpret and utilize those things. So memory was important in that build, insofar as, because of the subjectivity and unreliability of it, it worked really well with these themes of, you can do anything that you remember how to do, but remembering how to do it isn't as easy as just saying so. And also, I personally don't have a great memory. So, when you're hanging out with a group of people that you've known for a long time, and someone's recounting a story that you were present for, but you don't have any recollection of, and it's not, I feel like I need to say I was straight edge for a very long time. So it was not due to inebriation, which also obviously affects memory and has adverse quality. It just have a bad memory. So being present for storytelling, and then not having that be significant to me, was also a thing that I thought was interesting in the game, again, because you have characters that are sort of blank slates, and there's no implication that you knew one another in your life, especially with the scope that Necronautilus implies of everything ever that's died is here. So, if you died 1 billion years ago in a different planet versus yesterday, obviously in life you would have no commonality with your other player, but in the game you're both gas clouds, so you kind of get to start on the same level and work your way from there.
that you reminded me of something by talking about the scope of Necronautilus, because uh, memories emerge through play, and sort of players are coming up with the memories, and the GM can sort of inspire the memories as well as you kind of decide what memories are as you uncover them. I'm curious, for the times that you've played the game, how much are the memories very much earthbound sort of memories, like the typical human experience? Like, have you had people who are imagining things that are like not a human experience?
Um, Predominantly, they start off as human experience memories, and again, that's because that's what we reference as humans playing the game. Um, Often, if I'm running the game, I will try very early in the game to at least make players aware that they don't have to do that, or encourage just like one extra detail to push that away, because all it takes is that first domino, and then you see the memories getting more and more out there as they develop. And so, a lot of the time they are framed as human experience, or even human sci-fi understanding. So you'll still have, like a memory of riding this terrestrial beast, but it will be very like evocative of Conan the Barbarian or something. So it maybe not human in America in 2020, but still like human inspired media. Um, so really trying to push and encourage more alien, well, not as in a space way, but kind of, more
Sure.
different experiences early on leads to more wild differences later on. And I think too, in the Stellar Remnants companion, the zine collection, that's other people's contributions to the Necronautilus canon. Um, Jamila Najati wrote some character option stuff that was inspired by like a belonging outside belonging game, where you have these pick lists of traits that you can then assign to yourself, and some of them are about like what your look is like, even though again the characters are all these amorphous clouds, but they might just have like maybe your cloud is a different tint, or you still have some distinguishing features. And among those two are a selection of like memory inspiration um, prompts. And I think that does a really great job of reinforcing that idea that this isn't necessarily about earthly humans dying and then traversing the afterlife. It's about anything having to do that.
Yeah, I think that's the right way of doing it, is hitting that early on, like giving the players that flashbulb moment where they just go, "Oh, it can be like this." And if they get that
Yeah.
early on, it helps get that momentum going, exactly like you said, rather than 3 sessions in where you suddenly realize that you're free to do that sort of stuff. So, you mentioned that you have a bad memory, and this was sort of related to one of the questions that I had, which is, what is your quote unquote experience with memory before you started making this game, or sort of like major thoughts or assumptions that you have? So you mentioned that you have a or you have a bad memory or something like that. So like, what do you can you just kind of unpack that just a little bit? Because
Sure.
it surely informed the design process of using it as a mechanic.
Yeah. Um, so a lot of those instances of memory failure are um, dramatic, I guess, insofar as it's not just like forgetting a detail, it's
Mm.
forgetting the event. Um, and a lot of the time, too, I think that the way I prioritize certain things just in my lived experience, it helps determine what I do and don't remember. Because you know, on the blanket, I can say I have a bad memory, but I can remember like dumb things that happened in first grade. Um, so why is that one there? And I think that's the thing people say too, like, why is this story taking up space in my brain when this other thing is useful and it's not
Right.
there? So that's certainly a thing, but I also have a lot of, I think a lot of those instances are social, and that's what makes it
Mm.
seem like I have a worse memory than I do, because they're in some public space, whether it's just like at a party or a group of people telling stories, like I mentioned, or in an interview or something, trying to recall an instance, those then feel worse in a way. The lapse feels worse because it's not just insular. If I'm trying to remember something and I can't, it's just like a brain worm. But once I've admitted out loud that I can't, then it's become like a outward facing issue. But then there's also obviously different kinds of memory too. Like in my other life, I'm a touring musician, and I have never really ever forgot how to play a song that I helped write even more than 10 years ago. And songs that we don't play every day on tour, I can still pull those from wherever they exist. um, it's a different kind of memory a lot of the time, and often in performance it's purely muscle memory where it's not active at all, where I'm not thinking what's the next note that's going to happen. I just know what it is and where my arm goes. And so it's extremely like not in the forefront of my brain while I'm using it.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head when you talk about different types of memory. We generally split it into three categories of procedural or motor memory, as you're describing, where you can just bang out a song. Episodic, the stuff that's personal to us, like do you remember what happened on your 10th birthday? And you try and rack your brain about that. And then semantics, which is just like facts, like what's the date today, or something like that. So we have different experiences in those different types of memories. And so your experience is uh, everybody's experience with those memories is different. So it's cool to hear that.
I think too that the way that they can connect to one another and interact with one another. So like in your instance, if you say, oh, today is January 2nd, and then you have a recollection of something that happened on January 2nd, or yeah, just the sort of way they spark one another was definitely a thing that was integral into the mechanic in Necronautilus of you performing or attempting to perform some kind of action, whether it's generally a physical action, but as the forms are very amorphous, sometimes there's a lot of shape-shifting in Necronautilus. But to say when you roll and then you fail or you incur a memory from attempting that action, that's meant as this sort of parallel of something like that example, or of grabbing a hammer and remembering the last time you used a hammer. And especially with this pretense that the characters aren't allowed to access their memories, these are like accidental incidents, right? They're just, oh, I did a thing. I cut this creature open from its belly and all its guts came out. And now I just remembered that I did surgery. Like, oh, okay. And then you as players get to fill those blanks in, right? Because like the surgery thing is a leap of logic from the human player that then informs your player character. So I really liked the ability to not just have memories be these things that would advance what a player character is capable of, but why they would do it, why they would perform in particular ways to reinforce those memories, because that's to some degree their remaining sense of self is stored in these memories. And also, as a player, it gives you more tangible options to mess with, because you have this huge box of crayons and a problem comes up and you it's easy to get option paralysis. These kind of get to tell you like, well, this problem can be solved with a cool color, so you can just like cut out all these crayons and a little bit focus better on what you want to do.
Yeah, I that was one of my other questions, is about, memory was turned into, it has a mechanical function in your game. A lot of games have like background or occupation, or even things like descriptive in style, where those things don't necessarily have a mechanical impact. But did you kind of know out the gate that memory was going to be a function of this game, and it was going to like mechanically have an impact? Or did you just know memory had to be there and then the mechanics came eventually?
So the first mechanic that existed for sure was language, was using words. And I was really happy with how that was working, and the sort of, again, just like interpretive nature of everything and the subjective nature of how you play with, like having a player that uses the same word but uses it in a completely different way, or you in a different instance using the same word in a different way than you've used in the past because context is important. Um, that was really my like tunnel vision uh, plan for the game, and memory was this sort of a way to betray your core mission statement, because I think a lot of the themes of this game are about like rejecting uh, duty or authority, but those themes aren't as present if you're playing single session or short things. Like because the other thing about the memory mechanic is that it interacts directly with the life mechanic, and life is your health points, which is everyone familiar with RPGs understands when it goes to zero, it's bad, and when it goes up, you're healthy. But in this game, there is a cap on how high it can go, and as you approach that cap, it's technically illegal, right? Like, so life is a measure of your health in a game way, but also life in a universe where death is the god, is a 4-letter word. So memory is this way to interact with your life value and push it towards that extreme. So again, in a single session play, memories might come up once or twice, but that is designed for the longer play mode of having your memories kind of take over the function that the language otherwise serves. So as you play longer, your memories are more important, your words are less important. And then similarly, your higher life score becomes a narrative thing and also a mechanical thing to drive sort of an end game state.
That's very, very cool. And similar to what you were describing, where words in different contexts mean different things, our memories are also then shaped by context as well. What we're able to recall from things. So the two systems just they merge with one another so nicely. And kind of talking about that idea of context, and one thing that I mentioned in the video is this idea of false memories, essentially. So, where our memories are changed due to an outside influence, like somebody asking you a question, or just sort of with time, every time we rebuild our memories, we inevitably are going to make a mistake. So was that idea of maybe subjectivity of memories, or like the false memories, was that sort of at the forefront of your mind as you were building them, or were you trying to think of them more as like the movie Inside Out, where you have those core memories to you that like define you as a being?
For a different like media touchstone, I actually was going more for like a memento. So you have a memory that's very important to you in a way that's, I guess, not too dissimilar from Inside Out. The movies are extremely different, but you have this thing. So I won't talk about Memento just in case, even though it's fairly old. I don't want to spoil it because
Sure.
it's a movie that if you talk about it hardly at all, it's easy to spoil.
Right.
But thinking of a session that I played during testing where a player's reason for becoming a death agent was that they had been abandoned at the altar by a scorned lover. So they sort of, want to burn it down and don't care about anything. They just join the death agency. And that's what you start with. That's your reason. And that's part of character creation. And then also sort of fodder for later memories. And that sounds, in this instance of one sentence with no context, as traumatic. I mean, it's traumatic anyway, as like a an instance in which they were the victim of emotional harm, and when you get to then come back to it later in the story and add context to it, there's obviously a reason that this event happened. And as you pull the camera back and you expand the timeline, you see more instances that relate, that more than just like this 1 second event. The context completely changes and how you play that character completely changes. So that subjectivity was important, and also just the idea that we're all sort of the main character of our own narratives, and learning to be considerate of greater context and reduce that ego is valuable. So starting a game where your character has no ego and then you get glimpses of it, it's sort of tantalizing. It's almost like, as in the game where it's illegal, but you still want to mess with it. You want to learn more, but maybe learning more is also this sort of curse of knowledge in play, where the more you learn about that instance where you got left at the altar, the more you learn that you were maybe not a good person to begin with and you deserved that treatment. So again, that addition, that supplemental context that comes through play, especially long-term air quotes, a couple sessions where you get to explore memories more than once. Developing that context helps you not just make those skills more powerful, that you can use them in the game more effectively, but also adds more context to the history that was the person that you were before you became a death agent. And I think that's really, whether it's through words or memories or life score, one of the major things of Necronautilus was character creation doesn't happen at the onset of the game. It's this ever-present changing thing over the course of the whole game. And once the game's over, then you know who your character was, rather than these sort of standard putting time in and having this lengthy backstory pretense to who you are and why you act certain ways. This is designed to get you playing in 5 minutes or less and not worried about those things, but knowing that you get to explore those things as much as you want to later on.
That there's a word in that you, the word is so perfect. It's figuring out you figure out who your character was is so cool, because like in a lot of games you figure out who your character is,
Right.
because you are actively playing them. But that the fact that it is was just, it's so perfect. It's exactly in line with what Necronautilus is about. I have one more question for you here, and I don't know if it's something that you've been thinking about, but I was curious if you've had any thoughts about, as a Stellar Remnants are the sort of expansions or supplements that folks, you've already got one zine's worth that's out there, and there's sort of an open call for other folks to create Stellar Remnants. Is there anything that you would want to see or that you think would be interesting in the realm of memory for a Stellar Remnant?
So one of the things that I'm sort of just starting to poke at is, how can I engage with this universe from a perspective that is not of the Death Agent? The Death Agent being the only existing character option, and then again, you figure out what that character was before they were a Death Agent, which is also maybe distinct from before they were dead, because this universe sort of exists outside of time and also is effectively the afterlife. I really want to explore more what the not lived experience, but the death experience is for the more mundane characters in the setting. Um, and the illegality of memory, and that sort of that a lot of that is there to sort of keep the player characters in line with this responsibility that they've either volunteered for or been forced into as members of the agency. But those who live elsewhere in the universe don't necessarily have that same rule, that they can't remember who they were. It's more of a tool to keep you functioning in line. So I'm very curious on like what role memory serves in the greater universe. I think there's some stuff that we touched on. Viditia wrote in Stellar Remnants about these basically very wealthy people who were trying to escape the death universe and come back to life in some way. I think memory a lot of the time would encourage behaviors like that. And I think there's also a lot of opportunity for characters who do not yet realize that they are dead, and they have, memories affiliated with either their existence before dying or their existence now in this afterlife. without necessarily the instance of death. So those are things I'd like to explore maybe, but they also feel it's a little bit of a minefield. More so than I think the core loop of regular Necronautilus is. So yeah, I'm interested, and I'd also I really love what Jamie did with the memory prompts system that's in Stellar Remnants. Sorry, I have my headset's Bluetooth and it just disconnected and reconnected to my phone, which I'm not even using. But it told me it's talking to me in here. Shoot, so what was I saying? Yeah, I would like to see. So I think memory as this core loop mechanic in regular Necronautilus is pretty well accounted for. I mean, I say that, but if anyone touched it at all, I would be very impressed with any kind of reinterpretation of it. Right? That's not to say it's tread ground by any means. It's maybe not the most enticing aspect of what I'll chase in a sequel, but I think these lessons and themes that are imbued in the core game of memory and language and reality and responsibility and all of those things are sort of inherently tied to the setting and how the characters interact with one another. So yeah, I'm interested to see what I'll do and what anyone else might do with those themes in the setting.
It wasn't until you've mentioned it here that I never even thought about the idea of what memories do the non-death agents have in this universe, like the folks that they interact with. How much of that are they allowed to remember? Because at least in the few times that I've played, the people that I've the quote unquote people that I've interacted with seem to have some sort of cultural touchstones or something like that bonds them, that unites them. And the question is that something that was manifested in Death's domain that they just created for themselves, or is that some sort of a remnant that they remember from their prior lives? That's very cool to it's breaking my brain just to think about that idea.
Yeah, it's interesting to think too, because you're only exploring this setting through this one perspective that I supplied, that the agency and autonomy of all the other people that you interact with is sort of debatable, and even how real they are to you too. Is this just your afterlife? Is there a sort of utilitarian afterlife that everything goes to? That setting says that there is, but there's quite a few instances in the book of unreliable narrator, unreliable author telling you information that is crossed out or contradicted later in the rule book and things like that. So those are things I liked exploring, and I want there to be a lot of interpretation to how things work in the setting. And also there's obviously this game, I didn't want to just be your space cops. So right. There's quite a bit in the book about, violent alien creatures and fighting things that are maybe not sentient, or things that allow you to act violently in more acceptable ways. I think that will have a major, I think doing away with that or doubling down on it. So either interacting more directly with these dark forces and warlords and stuff, or getting away from it entirely and having you be on a planet or in a planetary system that is away from the sort of war dominions. Both of those are extremely different experiences, but they're both ones I'm interested in exploring. And a lot of the time too, I really want someone to take it and run with it, and so I can play with it, because I can only handle so much on my own. And I think that's a thing that I am starting to harp on now because the book is out and it's shipped to everybody, that I want more people to not just play with the game, but like play with it in a design sense and in a setting sense, in a fiction sense, and in any way that then kind of like becomes this feedback loop where I can experience it and be like, wow, I never thought of that. Doing the same sort of things as we're doing in this conversation of like, here's a tiny hole. And then like, what happens if we kind of peel it open and find out that there's more content, more ideas in there than I even intended there to be in creating it.
That's awesome. I really do hope that folks go wild with it. You know,
Yeah.
just find that hole, pick at it, and tear it open. Let's see what Necronautilus can be. Well, thank you so much, Adam, for taking the time to chat with me about Necronautilus and about memory. What sort of plugs? Where can people find you? All of that good stuff.
Sure. I'm on Twitter at WC Gameco. My games are all available at worldchamp.io, including Necronautilus print edition. And I'm on worldchampgameco.itch.io for all my digital editions. I have Babes in the Wood is my upcoming project that's coming to Kickstarter January 12th. It's a game about kids and creatures wandering the forests on Halloween, and the forest is sort of it's for fans of Over the Garden Wall or The Wizard of Oz or things where they're for kids, but they're very weird. So the forest is not just any forest, it's this sort of other dimension and everything's goofy and scary.
Excellent. I'll make sure that there's links to all of that stuff in the description down below. Thanks again, Adam, for taking the time. Hope you all enjoyed hearing this overview from the designer himself about Necronautilus. We'll catch you all next time.